Joy Harjo is one of the most fantastic people. I was lucky enough to befriend Joy Harjo. She's the current U.S. Poet Laureate, the first American Indian Poet Laureate, National Poet Laureate, Muskogee Creek. And she has been writing and teaching and playing her saxophone jazz for, my gosh, if she's 70 now, so that means she's probably been doing this in earnest since she was 20. Can you imagine a lifetime, like 5 decades, of your life immersed in poetry? I mean, it's such a beautiful concept, and her work has done a lot for unearthing metaphysical realms in American Indian culture. She writes a lot about women. She writes a lot about kind of loss and landscape, sorrow. If anyone has the chance, if you have not heard of Joy Harjo, just Google her, YouTube her, and see how she reads her poetry. There's such a stillness with which she reads. She really deserves to be U.S. Poet Laureate. But I'm lucky that she supported me when I told her I was writing my memoir, Black Indian, and I said, I'm writing it from this perspective, so this is my memoir, and I said I'm writing it from the perspective of an African American who has her entire life, the oral story has been, you have some Indian in you, and my job as the poet and the writer, the memoirist, was to write the story of my family, but also track down the history and the heritage of my family, which I did. And on my mom's, and I told Joy all of this, on my mom's side, we've got Eastern Band Cherokee, we've got Delaware Cherokee, we've got Kahari. On my dad's side, we've got Choctaw. And so not only do I have the oral history, but I also have the documentation now. So when I was telling Joy about this, she was like, just do it. She was like, write your story, go ahead and do that. So yeah, she has a special place in my heart.
And you selected a wonderful poem of Joy Harjo's. She Had Some Horses. Would you read this and tell us why you selected this poem?
I will, and this is just the first stanza. This is just the first selection. So again, I think if you look up Joy Harjo, you can go to the poetryfoundation.org and her entire bio will come up as well. So this is She Had Some Horses, the first stanza by Joy Harjo. She had some horses. She had horses whose, I'm sorry, let me start again. She had some horses. She had horses who were bodies of sand. She had horses who were maps drawn of blood. She had horses who were skins of ocean water. She had horses who were the blue air of sky. She had horses who were fur and teeth. She had horses who were clay and would break. She had horses who were splintered red cliff. She had some horses. And then it goes on from there, but it's such a beautiful poem. This is called a litany. The litany is, for the folks who are here, when you have the first few words of a poem repeated, right? The repetitiveness of it, then we call it a litany. So for example, if you, I have a couple of poems about memory. And so I start with, remember when you were young. So if I started every line with, remember when, then I'm creating a litany. So this poem is just such a beautiful, beautiful litany, which again, it kind of discovers and uncovers. I think I like the word uncovers and explores sensibilities in American Indian culture. And then also, if you're reading the full poem, just kind of what it would be like growing up on a reservation, or what it will be like growing up in an Indian community or an American Indian community. So it's a really beautiful poem.
It also gallops along, doesn't it? It has a rhythm to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly with the She Had Some Horses. And she had some horses who were. She had some horses who were. I do a little exercise when I'm teaching, and I have my students cover everything from She Had Some Horses Who Were, and then I have them just read Bodies of Sand, Maps Drawn of Blood, Skies of Ocean Water, The Blue Air of Sky, Fur and Teeth, Clay and Wood Break, Splintered Red Cliff. And then we talk about how that reading of that poem is so different from the adding She Had Some Horses, which makes it more complex. You know, it complicates the narrative, and it also adds a different kind of location. It relocates you, actually.
And the language is so simple. Some people make the mistake of thinking that poetry needs to be complex or flowery or built on
using theys and thous and those and these, you know. Yeah, it doesn't, poetry does not have to be complex. Or in terms of the words on the page, or in terms of the images you're attempting to create, it doesn't have to be a laborious, like a language dump, you know. It doesn't have to be that. And if you were studying poetry, so I have my BA, my MA, Master's in English, Creative Writing Emphasis, MFA. I'm a student of poetry. I've been apprenticing myself my entire life, you know, with regards to poetry, before I even got to college. So I recognize when there are poets like nature poets or metaphysical poets, such as John Donne, who are working within a format. And then I also see some other poets who are, what do they call the ones where they are naturalists or natural scientists. So they are attempting to do language dumps. But for us, the 20th century and 21st century poets, we're like, peel off all of the fluff. Peel, Lucille Clifton, write the bare bones, right? My good friend, Ruth Foreman, she learned, so she was working with Yusef Komanyaka. She was his TA at Berkeley. And he taught her, Yusef Komanyaka, award-winning poet, and he taught her, he said, write the truth, but write it sparsely. You know, just what are the bare bones? Not even the bare minimum of what people need to know, but what's the barest language that you can use, almost like chalk or bone, you know, and then put that on the page and let it rise.
Funny you should say that, because in the writing workshop that we had previously, I quoted James Baldwin, who said, write a sentence clean as bone.
Yes, James, yes. Or as Nina Simone would say, yes, Jimmy. Another one of our fantastic, just, you know, prophets.
She could write a song too.
Yes.
And now Sonia Sanchez is another poet that you selected.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about her?
Yes, I will. I'm just going to backtrack for a moment to say I just finished a draft of my collection of poetry about Nina Simone. Yes, I was the writer in residence at William and Mary to work on that collection of poetry. And I also finished half of the book at the Gentile residency in Wyoming. So I've been working on this book for a long time, and I just sent it to a couple of my friends who are my readers so they can start giving me feedback on it. So hopefully you'll be hearing some Nina Simone poems from me soon.
I look forward to that too. I love Nina Simone. She's terrific.
She's awesome. So Sonia Sanchez is one of my foundation poets. I really recommend her for young readers because of the way that she, I'll call it, breaks language. So she was one of my first poets, along with E.E. Cummings, who didn't capitalize, who used syntax in a different way. They put words on the page like stair steps, you know, or the shape of women, you know, a woman's body or something along those lines. So it really freed me as a young writer to say, wow, so poetry can really be anything I want it to be. And, you know, for a long time, you know, in my British Lit class and in my other English classes, we were reading, I love Stephen Crane, I really do, but we were reading kind of, some of, what does Stephen Crane do? What does John Donne do? What is Emily Dickinson doing, right? And a lot of that rhyming piece. Sonia, Sanchez, and E. Cummings were my saviors as a young poet. So Sonia, born in 1934 in Birmingham, Alabama, African-American woman, and she's fierce. I mean, she was a part of a movement of grandmothers maybe about 10 years ago who wanted to stop the war in the Middle East. And was it the Gulf War? I can't even remember which one it was, but these grandmothers went to the airport and they were stopped and they were like, you cannot go. And they were like, why can't we go? So, Sonia is an activist. She is one of the poets from the Black arts movement in the 60s, a friend of Amiri Baraka's, just a amazing woman. And I've read her a couple of times as well. So I'll go ahead and read her poem because I could just go on and on about my love for Sonia.
Okay.
Haiku. Haiku in the Tonka for Harriet Tubman. 1. Picture a woman riding thunder on the legs of slavery. 2. Picture her kissing our spine, saying no to the eyes of slavery. 3. Picture her rotating the earth into a shape of lives becoming. 4. Picture her leaning into the eyes of our birth clouds. 5. Picture this woman saying no to the constant yes of slavery. So, yeah. If you have not had occasion to hear any of Sonia's poems, go to YouTube and you will see how she sets the stage on fire. I mean, so for example, I have to say, she does an incantation where she will say, we got to bring our ancestors into this room. And so she'll say to the audience, okay, everyone, when let's just go ahead and start saying the names of our people who are in the other realm, who've crossed over. You will hear hundreds of people, depending on where she is, it could be thousands, and they're saying the names of their loved ones. And the energy changes in the room. And then she'll start reading a poem. And suddenly it's like you are a part of this poem in this moment. And she uses voice in such a very ancestral way. So for example, there's a poem that she wrote about a young girl whose mom was a drug addict. So in the poem, she has the voice of the girl. She says, "Mommy, mommy, 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 mommy." So she'll be using her voice in such a different way. Yeah, so just a wonderful teacher of mine who I think, because I sing in my poems as well, sometimes when I'm doing, when I do readings and I do lectures, actually, I do workshops, either I'll sing a song that I wrote, I call them song poems, or I'll sing something from, one of my American Indian songs or an African song, and I'm not shy to show how creativity and culture for me go hand in hand. So, I'll sing something like one of my West African dance songs. And then I'll go into a poem.
Fantastic. Well, that's amazing, Shonda. Here's one of your poems, and it's summertime, and this really evokes a memory of summer. Tell us a little bit about this poem, and then I'd love to hear you go from that song into this poem.
Yeah, sure. So the trail it's interesting. The trail is in this book, Who's Afraid of Black Indians? And I compiled this book, because I had a lot of poems about heritage, ancestry, ethnicity, my family, you know, kind of what it meant for us to, for me to rediscover our roots, for me to live with the feeling or the idea that our family was suffering from things we didn't know. And the trail, this poem for, I say for my Staffords, Roberts, Manuels, and Matthews, is a poem that kind of sums up, you know, the not knowing. And really, it is, in a way, it is me trying to give voice to the voiceless. So, and I'll pick up with that song. Pusa, 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 babadina, pusa. Babadina, pusa, babadina, pusa, 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 babadina, pusa, pusa, babadina. These are the holes that fill you up a morning after the 4th of July. The empty hollow, a memory in the fire. The quiet morning rises. Death of father, suicide of a nephew, addiction of a sister, another nephew at war, his brother prison, pummeling of a mother and aunts, the breaking of lives without a sound, no honor in their deaths or mistakes, no memory of them except here. These are the shimmering calcified minutes, the spotted ghosts of a Black Indian's Midwest life, where nothing and everything changed in the fires that burned your farmhouses down. And you wonder how you would have grown or been, how you would have loved had not this or this happened. I remember another July, years past under the glass of time, when we were all together laughing, spit polished by hard love, smoky with hunger for the future, when memory was a thing yet to come.
Here are some books that Shonda has suggested. Can everyone see this slide?
Yep.
And I'm a particular fan of Langston Hughes, who's really got some amazing stuff.
All right, that's so interesting. I think I'm on a new computer. The battery's fine.
Ah, Micheline. Fantastic.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Can I read it, Micheline? Second guess. City of the dead in always wild eclipse. Feast, light, spring, what black lament. Hey, Mercury, what architects? Flesh heroes like fire, a wonderful velvet, last love. The lines did not line up correctly on my poem. Oh well, I'm making that part of your poem.
Yeah. That is fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you for that list of books. I'll share that with everybody again. And Shonda, I wanted to ask you, how do you know after when you've been writing a poem, when it's done?
That's so, okay. I'm a different kind of poet. I don't know how anyone else writes or how anyone else, you know, recognizes that their poems are done. So the way that my meter works is if I'm crying at the end of my poem, then it's done. It's my meter. and then I have to read the poem before I read it in public. I have to read it at home in private because I'm blubbering and I'm like, this is so important, you know, to me. And then I can go and read it and emphasize the parts, you know, that I want emphasized. And that's when I feel like a poem is done. Maybe over the years I'll tinker, you know, with a couple of words, word choice, or maybe even, for example, there's a poem there are a couple of poems, but this one is called The Elephant in the Room, and it's for my one of my cousins. And the first stanza, so the first stanza goes, Clifford Henry Stafford was the first to leave Kalamazoo's country backwood roads, taking the Black Indian dream dust our grandfather kept in the cool shaft of his double-barrel shotgun above his bed. And so when I first wrote that part, I was like, there were some things like I didn't have the Black Indian in there. I didn't have, I think the double-barrel shotgun. I think I had something else above his bed. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. The cool shaft of his double-barrel shotgun. Because I wanted the feeling, like the texture of someone looking down the barrel of a gun, which is also a connotation for danger, right? It's also kind of, yeah, so there's a reference to the concept of danger there. And so in the revising of the poem, I went back and added a couple of those pieces. Now I would say the poem is done because it does what I need it to do. I needed this poem to talk about my my cousin who came to LA before I came to Los Angeles, and he was an actor. He was a good an extra on Good Times, and you know, back home in Kalamazoo, we were like, oh my God, he's the biggest star we know, you know. And but he also died of AIDS. He was one of the 500 that patients, they call him patient zero. There was a guy going around, you know, doing that. And I know we've got younger viewers, so I won't go into it specifically, but I wanted to write the poem from my perspective as an 18-year-old woman coming to LA to live, and my cousin and I just kind of missing each other because he had died from AIDS. So the poem did what I wanted to do, and I was done tinkering with that one. I still cry though when I'm reading that poem.
But you got to admit, it's always fun to say double-barrel shotgun. That's
double-barrel shotgun, cool shaft of the double-barrel shotgun above his bed. So yeah,
that's perfect, and it has the connotation of danger, I think, that you intended. Now look, we have a new poem here.
Oh, Solas, Ms. Wright, alone in Latin, a life without conviction or condemnation, to change course without questions or having to provide, rationalization, to read all night and sleep till noon, to become obsessed with the persona of strangers or musicians or poets or the artifice of actors, to drift from the mainland, to walk in a field under the stars, unafraid. Oh, that's gorgeous.
Wow.
Gorgeous. I love the spacing of the poem too. I really, that has a E.E. Cummings harken to me, you know, harkens to E.E. Cummings and how he spaced his work. And then Nancy Silva, when we die, our eyes turn into sunflowers, searching for the sun, waiting for it to illuminate the darkest crevices in our conscience. Not finished, not sure where to go or how to transform any feedback would be great. Oh, shame. I'm still making that. I'm making that a part of the poem.
I like that.
Maybe that's the next line. Not sure, not finished, not sure where to go.
I love
Stop
that.
right there. and then keep going from there.
That's terrific.
Yeah, Nancy. No, I really think you stay. So she's asking for feedback. Stay in the vein of the shape of the sunflower. Maybe even look at the contents, like the pistil, you know, what makes up the sunflower, the black, the yellow, you know, start thinking about just kind of, you know, how you can use every part of that sunflower to reflect whatever it is you want to say.
I think we've got some really terrific poetry here in the chat box.
This is lovely. I
The
love it. And I love having a 12-year-old here as well.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, so I think in the something you asked me, you said, who are some of the younger poets that young people should read? So I think in terms of the elementary school students, all the elementary school students are reading Shel Silverstein. You know, and I think because of how he writes he uses language in a kind of a fantastical or fanciful way, and so it makes it funny. But I also recommend Langston Hughes, you know, his jazz poems, his blues poems, and because there's always like the feeling or the texture of the music, but then there's also a little bit of identity. You know, he's trying to find himself as a Black man in America. I also think that this book on my shelf, I'm just going to scoot over. There's a book on my shelf right there. Oh, look, my thumb can point to it. It's called I Am the Darker Brother. It's an anthology. I'll actually put it here in the chat box. I Am the Darker Brother. It was published in 1968, the year I was born. It has poets from the Harlem Renaissance movement, the New Negro Poets movement, contemporary poets. And the book has it has several reiterations of it. So it's been, you know, republished and new poems and new poets added to it. But I mean, I think for younger poets, when you're writing because you're searching for something, you know, you're writing because you want to say something in a way that hasn't been said to you before. And as an older poet too, I guess I'll say it like that. You know, I've taught seniors as well. I've taught, you know, many senior classes, and they're functioning from a space of memory where people haven't told their particular story, right? So yeah, so I definitely recommend I Am a Darker Brother. There's another great compilation of poems, a book of poetry anthology that I teach called 250 Poems. There are several editions of that one as well. That has everything from Shakespeare on up to Jimmy Baca and, you know, contemporary poets. So yeah.
You know, a memoir is one of the more difficult forms to write in, and it's a triumph, Shonda.
Thank you.
And
it's
really
difficult.
Well worth
Thank you.
mine. And so,
can I say something
sure.
about my book? One of my brilliant friends. It's always lovely when you have brilliant friends who say brilliant things about your work. So when she read my book, and she said, Shonda, you have done something that no one else has done. And I'm like, what did I do? What did I do? And she said, you have written a book that is not just a personal narrative, but it's a historical narrative. It's about it's historicity, you know. So I'm tracing in this book. I'm also, and it's very poetically written. Some people have said your images are it's so image laden. I'm like, because I'm telling a story. That's why the images are laden. But through telling the story of racial formation in my family, I'm also looking at racial formation in this country, and I'm looking at how there is evidence of how people of color, POCs, or African Americans, or the Latina, or we back in the past we would say Hispanic, and then it was like, no, they're not Hispanic. They're not from Spain. It's Latino, Latina. And then it was like, it's Latinx, you know. So for some reason, we keep changing our cultural labels to fit presently, to fit who we actually are. But in the past, those labels were applied to us. And so we were called mulatto. You know, in the past, we were called red bone. We were called Negro. We were called for American Indians, you know, before the term American Indian or First Peoples or Indigenous Peoples, it was Indian, you know, just kind of plain Indian, because people didn't necessarily know their tribes, or they only knew their tribes because they wanted to, well, I shouldn't say only, but, you know, they knew the tribes because they knew the tribes they wanted to remove to get the land. And that's a whole nother story that you can look up for my young people. If you want to look at, you know, research the Trail of Tears, and you can learn a little bit about kind of the history of some Indian tribes who were removed from their land. But I think that the labels that have been applied to us, and have formed and shaped and our identity, but it's also forced a kind of erasure. And so when my friend said, you've done something that no one else has done with this book, I was like, thank you, sis, thank you. So an observation piece that normally people start with saying, we have to acknowledge that we are on in other people's lands, right? And so in California, we are on the Tonba, the Chumash. There are many other nations, but in Los Angeles, the Chumash, the Gabrielano. So I'm just going to sing a little bit of one of the children's honoring songs, like a verse or two. A Chumash children's honoring song goes, we ya 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 yo, we ya 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 yo, we ha ya ya yo, we ha yo. Way hi yo, way, 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 ya, hey yo. Go forth and write. Go forth and tell your story.
Thank you so much. Good night, all.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, kids.
Yeah.
Thank you.